Hi, I'm Jeff Kowalczyk, and today I'm going to be talking about capturing millennial impact in financial reporting. This is a topic that affects not-for-profit organizations of all sizes, from the very small to the very large, and in all sectors within the nonprofit world. It's also a topic that is becoming of increasing importance as the scope of millennial involvement in not-for-profit organizations continues to grow. Probably the best place to start would be to define what we mean by millennials. There are a number of different definitions available, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm generally talking about individuals born between the early 1980s and the year 2000. That would put their current ages between 16 and 35. To give a little perspective on this generation, there are over 80 million millennials in the United States alone, which makes the millennial generation the largest generation in American history. By comparison, the baby boomer generation was just over 75 million individuals at its peak. In addition to being the largest, the millennial generation is quite possibly the most diverse generation in American history. Despite the wealth of different backgrounds and experiences, one thing that almost all millennials do have in common is that they grew up with technology as a significant and entrenched part of their life. There are many ways that millennials contribute to nonprofit organizations, but the three main areas that I'd like to talk about today are monetary contributions, volunteering, and social outreach. Monetary contributions are similar to traditional contributions that you've received. A couple different twists that come into play when you're talking about millennials. A lot of the contributions are given through mobile phones or through tablets, and that is a combination of either using apps or accessing websites through mobile devices, and also those text contributions that you might see after a natural disaster where you can text a 5-digit number and it'll automatically add a $10 contribution to your phone bill. So there's a couple different twists on the monetary contribution concept that apply a little more heavily for millennial individuals. Volunteering. We are seeing that the millennial generation volunteers at a very high rate, and we're also seeing a lot of skilled labor type volunteers from the millennial generation. Finally, as I mentioned, the millennial generation grew up with technology, largely are very comfortable with technology, and are very comfortable sharing their opinions through technology. And what this does is provides a great deal of ability to reach out to large audiences and promote social causes. Probably one of the primary examples we've seen of this was the Ice Bucket Challenge in 2015. But we also see a lot of examples of this on a smaller scale with individuals reaching out to their network of 100, 200, 300 individuals and raising awareness that way. The first and simplest type of contribution to capture in your financial reporting are monetary contributions. And the reason that these are the easiest is that you're already recognizing them if you're reporting in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or the cash basis of accounting. They're already being captured. A couple things to consider with monetary contributions, in addition to the traditional mailers, fundraising events, etc., many millennial donors will access online contributions through a mobile device or a tablet. So it's important to ensure that your website is developed and prepared in a way that it can accommodate these sorts of transactions. You want to make sure that your website is optimized for mobile devices. Another thing to keep in mind is if you are collecting a significant amount of money through online or mobile methods, you want to make sure that the individuals or the organization processing those transactions have appropriate internal controls, procedures, and policies. One thing we look at as an auditor is a service organization control report called a SOC 1 report. If you are getting a significant amount of online contributions, we would recommend that you obtain that on a semi-annual or annual basis. It's something that your auditor is going to ask for, but it's also important that you are doing your due diligence. The next major contribution method is volunteering. The Millennial Impact Report for 2016 found that millennial individuals actually volunteer at a higher rate than previous generations. They're not sure exactly what causes this, but there are a number of factors that may be taking a role. First of all, volunteering is required for graduation in a lot of school districts. And also with the rise of self-esteem education, individuals do place a greater value on their time. And therefore, when they have an organization they like and want to support, they find their time is one of the most valuable things they have. For financial reporting purposes, volunteers fall into two groups. There are general volunteers who might be doing data entry, painting, light social service type activities. And then there are also skilled volunteers. Skilled volunteers are those who perform a task that requires special skills and for whom you would have had to pay somebody to do the work if it were not for the volunteer. So if we're thinking about things like legal services or receiving plumbing services from a licensed plumber, those are the types of things that are considered skilled volunteers as opposed to general volunteering. Now, volunteer contributions are an area where the recognition requirements differ depending on whether it's skilled or general volunteer labor, and also whether we're talking about a financial statement or an IRS Form 990. So services donated by skilled volunteers are required to be reported as contributions on your financial statements if you're reporting in accordance with GAAP, and they're required to be reported at the fair market value for the services provided. Conversely, Form 990 does not permit the inclusion of donated services, so this will create a reconciling item between the two reports. If you have skilled volunteer donations, this should not be a change from how you've been reporting it in prior years, but if you have not been recognizing them, then that is something you will want to start doing in future years. Services donated by general volunteers are not permitted to be reported as contributions in the financial statements, but you are allowed to disclose information about the number of volunteers, the number of volunteer hours in the notes to the financial statements. You also are allowed to put an estimated value of that, which can be based on different labor costs that are available. Generally, they are right now, the different scales look around $20 an hour. So if you extrapolate the number of general volunteer hours you have by that $20 rate, you can see that it'll add up pretty quickly. And that's something that might be nice to disclose in the notes to the financial statements for a reader of your financial statements who might be looking to give a grant or get involved with your organization so they can get a little better understanding of what keeps you going. So, while not allowed to include either kind on Form 990, there is a place to disclose the number of volunteers, and in addition to that, in your program service accomplishment descriptions, you can always work in the number of volunteer hours, especially if it is significant to the accomplishment of your service. That's certainly something you can do to kind of weave it in there. The third and final area that I'd like to talk about are social outreach contributions. Now, these are the hardest to measure, but they are very important to your organization. And what social outreach contributions are things like likes on Facebook, if you get mentioned in a blog post, if people tweet about your organization, and these are not directly reportable as financial activities, but they do have value because they bring increases to the financially reportable volunteering contributions and monetary contributions. So when you're looking to measure these, you may not necessarily be looking at things you report to the outside world, but you want to measure them and aggregate them internally to help management define how to use your budget to best further the organization's goals. So those are the 3 types of contributions that I wanted to talk about today. To wrap it up, millennials have shown an eagerness to contribute, but traditional measurements of contributions have tended to under-reflect the types of contributions that millennials make to an organization. To ensure that you're capturing all of the relevant data, you should develop methods to aggregate volunteering and social outreach data and report them in addition to your traditional financial data. When possible, you should include them in your financial statements. If they're relevant to your program service, they can be included in Form 990, and anything that doesn't quite meet either of those criteria can be reported internally or in relevant program-related documentation. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.